I think there's a need within the space for more honesty, more counterpunching, counterculture views, and a place for the political homeless to be, because that's where I am these days. I don't really fit in with any one group. I am truly a free thinker. In preparation for the upcoming political and cultural commentary videos that I'll be making, I decided to cover many of the core political topics, quickly cover my views on it, including capitalism versus communism, my stance on free speech, guns, abortion, religion, big government versus small government, how I came into politics, how I approach politics, where I think I currently line up in the political spectrum, and a whole lot more. Didn't go too into detail because this would have been a probably 6-hour video, but if you're curious about where I stand on any of these topics, this will give you a general summary of many of my core political beliefs. So first and foremost, I've done politics on X. I used to really yap back in 2022 when I was probably like my most political. I've done it on Instagram, same kind of thing, a couple feeders, but then a ton of story posts back in the day. It also hijacked my newsletter for a second there, and then second channel, done a few things there, but I have not done any main channel videos with politics. So this is new, but as I switch my strategy, I want to integrate some politics here and there and cultural commentary, if you will. So if you like that kind of thing, if you appreciate my mostly reasonable takes, then consider subscribing. The thing I love about this is it's long form, so we can get more nuanced about things. I don't need to just give you a hot take. That's kind of my gripe with what X is. There's a lot of people who will just give you a really, really hot take in short form, don't give any more explanation or context, and I'm guilty of this sometimes as well. But the beauty about conversation or long form yapping like I'm about to is that you can take a little bit more time and give a little bit more nuance and thoughtfulness behind your point, and it doesn't need to be like this divisive attention farming, clip farming thing that so often we see within the social media platforms. And YouTube is not really a social media platform, it's a content platform that happens to have some social media attributes. Some context on my politics, if you haven't ever seen me talk about politics before, avoided it up until 2020. Then I realized, holy shit, this actually has a huge impact on our day-to-day lives. It doesn't dictate everything, definitely not, but it is important, does have an effect on things culturally, things economically, the world at large. So I didn't realize how political everything really was until it was just forcing me in the face with COVID and then BLM, and then it was over from there. I just got way too into it, and then kind of just like making up for lost time for ignoring it for the first 23 years of my life at that point. So 28 now, but it really started around like June 2020. I am an independent voter. I only started voting recently, and due to the insanity of what the left has become, I have only voted conservative so far. I forgot to mention this, but I'm Canadian, so when I say conservative, I'm talking about the Conservative Party of Canada. Everything has shifted so much more left-leaning here, so our conservative is not even technically right-wing, it's more like center, maybe just a tiny bit to the right. So voted for them. And then provincially, I voted as well for New Blue because they seem to be the only people that actually have any integrity in the provincial race. However, they are actually conservative. But with that being said, I would vote a quote-unquote left-leaning person so long as they are based in reality and anti-establishment and just aligning with my values, like going back to classical liberalism kind of thing. I am a very middle ground person in many ways, like just common sense values, just keeping it pretty reasonable. But I have to be honest, I'm also very prone on going to extremist territory sometimes. So gotta watch myself with that always. But I try to be fair and reasonable, but truth is number one for me. And sometimes that leads me into territories where it's really uncomfortable. That's my number one North Star. Truth is not always comfortable. Truth is not always easy to accept, and it also sometimes requires doing the unsexy, not so nice things and holding a certain level of standard and line. So while I'm a pretty caring person, I also am very okay with leaders being ruthless and doing what needs to be done, because at the end of the day, I understand that is what leadership requires, and it's not always going to be unicorns and rainbows. I think truth is often in between the two extremes, but also sometimes it's very close to the one extreme or the other. And sometimes it is that extreme, but I think it's typically in between the two. If you were to compare me to anyone's politics, like the two people I admire the most within politics, cultural commentary and straight up like people involved in politics, would be Andy Frisella, and who is just an absolute unit, an absolute G. Fucking love that guy. And then Vivek Ramaswamy. He's like, they're very kind of similar in their beliefs, but Vivek is actually in the game in that regard. And I love everything he's saying, but just as importantly as what he's saying is how he's saying it and his actual energy he delivers everything in terms, like, obviously he's a phenomenal speaker, and he's like one of a kind type of charisma, like that kind of thing. But how unifying he is in the way he holds his line, stands his ground, says what needs to be said without hate or division. And that's something I've always struggled with within this, because it's a very like ugly, like I want to lead with love, but holy hell, sometimes I've definitely led with hate, and like that's no good for the other person on the other side. It's no good for me either. And that's unfortunately like very prevalent within politics, which is just a lot of divisive, hateful types of things. And we'll definitely touch more on that with some leftist stuff later. But those two are my favorites. Andy's extreme as fuck and also very common sense. And Vivek is like extremely reasonable, extremely unifying, and they're just both phenomenal in different ways. I believe the US Constitution is one of the most admirable things that has ever been created. The fact that a bunch of like mostly young men created this set of principles and values that were like, some of them were barely adults. Like, it's just crazy to think about the foresight they had to think about everything that they did. So I think it's one of the greatest things of all time. It's also why I'm obsessed with the US. Like, I am Canadian, but man, America is definitely my favorite country. I fully recognize it as dark sides as well. And it's also fallen short of the American potential. But due to that Constitution and the people in America, I think it has the greatest potential of any country, especially those countries who are fighting or going against the global agenda for communism, aka Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, whatever the hell you want to call it. But I think they have the greatest shot of going against that. And just like the principles itself, the potential is absurd in a great way. So I'm hugely bullish on America in that regard. I have pretty strong opinions about things, but I'm also very willing to listen if you're going to make sense. You need to be logical though. I'm not interested in any of this bullshit, Marxism, identity politics, mental gymnastics. Like, you need to make sense. I'm very willing to admit when I'm wrong. I'm willing to admit where I fall short and fuck up. I'm also willing to change my mind if given new information. Apparently that's just like not really a thing within politics. And this is what happens when you build your identity around your opinions or your political party or your favorite candidate. It's retarded. Don't do it. We'll talk about that later in a bit. But I know I'm not going to get everything right. I'm just going to do my best, and I will eventually fall short of where I'm shooting for. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world. I'm very, very pro-business and pro-capitalism. However, I stop short at the whatever the fuck this corporatism thing has become. Like, I'm not interested in that whatsoever. I can't stand the merger of government with media, business, pharmaceuticals. I'm extremely, extremely, extremely against progressivism, wokeism, all of this shit that is just like Marxist garbage that is really, really damaging towards traditionalism, common sense values. Basically, like, whatever the fuck happened, 10, 20 years ago, like, what happened to all those, like, the good values from then? Like, I don't want to go back to everything from that, but take the good, go back to that. And I'm also very against progress for the sake of progress. Like, you need to know where you're going. Don't just progress for the sake of. I used to be very, very contrarian. I still am sort of contrarian. I'm very much like a counterpuncher. So if I find myself in a room of full conservatives, I find myself constantly talking about the things that aren't conservative as a means to take the other side, see what we're not seeing. And that's a question that I've journaled so many times. What am I not seeing here? I used to be absolutely obsessed with it. I'm always interested in seeing what the other side is. How many different ways can I look at this? Like, what data am I missing from this that either renders this true or untrue? Just trying to see as many different perspectives as possible, because like there's three sides to a coin, and many, many more in life. So it's just a matter of like trying to give yourself as many data points as possible and then pick whatever the most logical is. And most importantly, pay attention to your intuition, because that will lead you to places that even logic, from what you can see right now, your intuition will see that much more, because it can analyze all the data points, but it's not analyzing because it's intuition. I'm about to go off on a fucking sidebar there, but that's why intuition is so fucking powerful. And then because you just have a wider range of vision perspectives to select from, you can just take whatever the best item is. It's just OP. And for all you boomers, that means overpowered. But yeah, to go back to progressivism, I think it's a very hateful ideology that's really good at marketing itself as being like the good guys and just hiding under false virtue. But if you think about any of these positions enough and just observe these people, like the true progressives, quote unquote, are like just objective pieces of shit. Like they're just not good humans, man. You can see how much hate they have in their heart. I remember I was watching Matt Walsh's Am I Racist? And just like the black woman with the group circle, the way she was talking about things, bro, you could just see how much anger and hate she had towards white people, conservatives, just like anyone that disagrees with like the far left probably. And man, that kind of thing is just very prevalent throughout progressivism. So I'm not a fan of it at all. It also makes no sense, any of the concepts or the principles. You have to not think for it to make sense. And thank God I did not fall for all that shit, because we would be looking at a very different Josh right now if that's the case. It is cancer towards the country, and it is also cancerous towards yourself. It is legit a religion at this point. But that being said, you could say that about a lot of things within politics, not just progressives. I am not religious, but I am not atheist either. I am very connected with life and God. And I know a lot of religious people are like, oh, well, you can't be connected to God if you don't have religion, and you've been psyoped. So congratulations on that. But yeah, I do disagree with the fundamentals within. There's like at least one major thing I disagree with within every single religion. So I just try to keep myself outside of it. Once again, going back to the lack of identity, you are absolutely psyoped and absolutely controllable when you get stuck into any one closed system. So I stay out of it. I'm more objective. I am a better truth seeker outside of religion than within. I also think involving religion in a government is the stupidest fucking concept. A lot of patriots in the US are like, damn, like we need to fix all that's going on right now by, merging Christianity and state. And I think that if Christianity was as great as you thought it was, you wouldn't need to merge it with state. People would just naturally come towards it. And that's true with all religions, obviously not just with Christianity, but I do not like that whatsoever. Anything that starts to look like government intervening in my life, telling me what I need to think, is a massive red flag. And Christianity does not get a pass here just because a lot of the Constitution does line up with Christianity. And it's also a secular nation. Like, for whatever reason, Christians go absolutely blind when they think about this. But freedom of religion is part of the Constitution. Therefore, it is not a Christian state. I don't know why this is so fucking hard for people to get, but that's the case. But even though I disagree with key things in every single religion, I think people are often better off with it than without it. It's just, I'm not going to do it because I think I'm better off without it, because I'm that hardcore of a truth seeker. And I also have a good moral compass and good values irrespective of it, because good values do exist outside of all of those religions. And honestly, I just don't want the dogma of any one religion. And again, I disagree with so many different things. So I'm not going to do it. But for other people, I would say you're looking at like, 70s, 80s, 90s% of truth. And for many people, that's like an awesome thing. It's just, I'm not going to do it. Now, at the same time, even though there's many things I disagree with, I do my best to be respectful of different people's religious beliefs in general around this kind of stuff. Even though it's rarely reciprocated for whatever reason, it just gives you moral superiority on everything. And it ends up just feeding the ego instead of actually connecting with God. But that is a sidebar. That is another thing I can rant about all day long, but we'll save that for another time. But yeah, I don't think there is any one true religion. There are religions that are more accurate in some things, others that are more accurate on others. Just do the best you can to pick the right thing, or just don't get into religion at all. That's also an option. But you need to make sure you're able to check yourself and also listen to your intuition about what's real and what's not. For abortion, I don't think it's a good thing, but I also don't think it should be necessarily outlawed. I don't want government intervening with people. But at the same time, as I say this like obsession with promiscuity and ridiculous amounts of sex that is either unprotected or just like a total lack of preventative options. If you're using abortion as birth control, that is straight fucking trash. For me, it's like, put bans on the crazy timelines and the extreme stuff near the actual birth. Like, I don't know why people are so obsessed with that. It's fucking strange. However, even though people try to demonize pro-life people, they are by far and away way more on the good side of things than the other side, which is like celebrating abortions. That is the weirdest shit of all time to me. Massive fan of freedom of speech. I think it's fundamental to democracy, which I think is very ironic considering they really, really try to say it is opposite of it, or it is a threat to democracy. It's like, you guys have absolutely lost the plot. I'm absolutionist in my free speech views. The only place I draw the line is obviously like call to action and inciting violence. Like, that's different. Free speech is literally the greatest fucking thing of all time. That is why they put that as the first amendment within the Constitution, because it is that important. It's not there for the easy stuff. It's there for the hard stuff, the ugly stuff, the stuff that you would rather censor someone than not, but you let them speak because of freedom of speech. Again, things communists just don't understand. Or rather, they do, and they're trying to infiltrate that. Also a big fan of expanding the Overton window. Extremely pro-gun in 2A. It's so weird, man. The Canadians that are like my fellow Canadians do not understand this at all, especially because they all grew up with this. Obviously, I grew up with it as well. I wouldn't say I was ever like anti-gun necessarily, but I could have been convinced about why they're not good. I always knew from a young age, younger at least, I remember like having this belief in like 2014 kind of thing. So I would have been around 18 at the time. I was talking to a police officer and he said, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And I agree with that fundamentally. It's like the shootings are not solved by taking the guns away. First and foremost, fixing consciousness, which they are not interested in doing. So that's number one. Number two, mental health. If you're not going to actually like help these people, if you're just going to put them all on like fucking prescription drugs and just have them on that big pharma pipeline, good fucking luck. That is something that no one talks about. Almost every single shooter is just absolutely fucked up mentally, and they're all on these types of drugs. And many are also leftists. Fun fact. Ridiculous amount of the shooters in the past few years have all been like leftists who pretend to LARP as Republicans just to give Republicans and gun owners a bad name. It's fucking ridiculous. They also don't care about correcting school shootings whatsoever. If they did, they would add more guns, not try to take them away. Taking away guns from the good guys does not stop the bad guys from having guns. They're going to have guns anyways. They are criminals. So if there's a law put in place that requires you to give up your guns as the good guy, that empowers the bad guys with the guns. The fastest way to take someone out who is a shooter publicly is to have another person with a gun, whether that's a cop or just another civilian. And if all the good guys have guns, there's a better chance of the civilian taking down that person with a gun than a cop, because there's only so many cops. So I, as a self-identifying good person, I think I'm better off having that gun. Society is more safe with me having a gun than not having a gun. And the most underrated part about 2A is that it exists to protect against government tyranny based What else can I say? Taxation is extortion. I'd be more okay with paying taxes if I knew it was actually going to something good instead of, Israel or Ukraine or any of this absolute nonsense like, fucking carbon tax. Like, what is that even doing, bro? Or paying people in the government to have DEI divisions. Like, this shit is absolutely retarded. Giving illegals handouts through that same, oh my God, bro. It's just not good, bro. Especially while other communities within the country suffer. Fucking horrendous. So if it was actually at a reasonable amount, not this like retarded 60%, 50%, 40% kind of stuff. If it was at a reasonable level, like say 10%, 15%, something like that, and you got the government really efficient, I'd be okay with doing that so long as they're using it towards the right things, building the correct infrastructure, using it for critical things, not just the inessential across the board. I'm very, very like anti-big government and ridiculously bloated spending and just like money is no object. Extremely against communism and socialism. I think socialism is many times just a nicely packaged version of communism. The problem with socialism is there's always more socialist you could be. Like, they never get it quite right, and then they're just always trying to just go even harder, and it's like, it's so dangerous. Some people tout communism as like this really good thing. It is the most destructive thing in modern history. I have no idea why anyone has ever supported this. There is zero thought behind this shit. It is pure mental gymnastics and emotions. And then it ends up with you being the useful idiot who helps them implement this evil agenda. And unfortunately, you end up facing the wall. So anyone who cheers for that is absolutely suicidal, because the people who do cheer for are the people who often have the least and also think the least. But they have the least, so they think, oh, if I cheer for communism because I have so little, it will help make things equal. No, because anyone who doesn't contribute within communism is forced to face the wall, and they get executed because there's only so many resources, and they limit the resources to the people who actually contribute. So if you cheer for this, you have no idea what you're cheering for whatsoever. And people who are like, oh, well, we just didn't implement it correctly any of the other times, to which I would say exactly what I just said. Any other of the times? Like, how many more experiments do we need of this horrendous concept? The communist death toll is in the hundreds of millions. It is the highest of any war, pandemic, all of this bullshit. It's crazy to me that people actually support this stuff. But it's what happens when you've been psyoped. At the same time, everything I just said, I think it does work on a small enough level with like the immediate family, but it is impossible to work at like a state or provincial in our case, or a federal level. It is absurd. It's complete idealism. It doesn't make any sense in reality. And there's a reason why the worst countries on the planet are either full-blown communist or like teetering around socialist. I'm a big fan of as little government as possible. So I'm not a big fan of this horseshoe where it's like big government on the right, big government on the left, whether that's like socialism or just authoritarian, like fucking crazy right-wing shit. So as little government intervention as possible, keep it just to the essentials, as I've touched on. I'm mostly an isolationist, just stay the fuck out of foreign wars. Very anti-war. Almost every war is completely pointless and is just Israel bringing in countries that don't need to be involved through leverage and potentially blackmail. And then our country is giving up our troops, our young people, our young men primarily. And it's literally trading lives for dollars. War is almost always extremely evil, and it's rarely ever for the reasons that they say it's for. It's almost always for destabilization and profit, which is that, and obviously slavery are the worst parts of the American history. But no country is perfect in this regard. Everyone had slaves. Every country has had wars. It's been ugly for civilization as a whole, not just America, not just Canada, all of them, bro. But I completely digressed on the government intervention. There are times where you should intervene, because you can't just let the people who are a threat to your country just run loose and run amok. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be some times where you hold the line and it's very clearly stated. But keeping those laws, those policies as rare as possible, I think is a very, very good thing. Now, if I was to place myself in the political compass, I would place myself near the bottom and the middle of the right segment, if that makes sense. So it's like not center, but not far right, pretty much directly dead center within that box. Many people might call me a far right extremist. I can understand at least what they're saying. Probably not. I think my assessment is decently accurate. I could be wrong though, but I just know there's many such cases when you are not with the far left that you're automatically labeled far right. Honestly, it's pretty funny when people call me far right though, because 20 years ago, I just would have been probably like a Democrat with everything I just said. But things have changed so much. Like, I appreciate classical liberalism. I am quite libertarian in my views, but I don't identify with any specific party or ideology. Maybe the only one I actually kind of get close to identifying with fully is like anti-establishment. But even that, you got to be careful. You got to be careful with your views, because if there's an establishment thing that does make sense, you will stop yourself from seeing it because you put your identity within the anti-establishment. So you got to be cautious of those identities because they will steer you in the wrong direction. At the end of the day, I'm just a guy who's trying to seek the truth. I get it wrong sometimes, and that's okay. But I am doing my best to be honest, reasonable. I'm just trying to question it all, notice what's real, what's an illusion, what's true, what's false, and just doing that forever. Now, because I'm so dedicated to truth seeking, I do find myself going down some very, very questionable rabbit holes and exploring things that I shouldn't be exploring, or thinking, pondering, questioning things you're not supposed to. But that is what real truth seeking looks like. It's going in places where you're not supposed to. It's touching things that you've been told that if you touch, you will get burned. So while I will fuck up, I'm absolutely just doing my best. Hope you will give me that grace, because trust me, I will say some bullshit sometimes, and then I will wake up the next day and be like, okay, I was completely wrong about that. Constantly changing my mind, by the way. As soon as I get new information that I believe is accurate, my opinions are being updated. Strong opinions, loosely held, Mark Andreessen. That has been fundamental for me. So that was a summary of my main thoughts throughout politics and what my current value system looks like. Maybe if I do this like once every year or so, that'd be interesting to see how this updates. That could be a good idea, actually. That could be a good idea. Nice download. I'm probably going to be doing more cultural commentary stuff like this, in addition to videos I make on creativity, performance, spirituality, all sorts of things. But I'm very deeply interested in politics. I think about it probably way too much, but I think there's a need within this space for more honesty, more counter-punching, counter-culture views, and a place for the political homeless to be, because that's where I am these days. I don't really fit in with any one group. I am truly a free thinker. A lot of people throw that word out and then just become extremely right-wing and then just stop questioning everything. They just fall into line within that specific group. I am not that. I have found myself in the conservative area, and then there's just things I disagree fundamentally with conservatism, and that's okay. Like, I'm not supposed to agree with every circle or box. As I touched on earlier with religion, my meta approach towards basically all things in life is to just take the truth from all these different boxes and then put it together and create my own value system. I'm not going to be inside of any political party. I'm not going to be inside, even if for whatever reason I run under a political party someday, I won't agree with everything within that political group. Religion, I will most likely never do religion because I won't agree with 100% of anything. I will stay questioning and seeking the truth until I die. And I just do think there is a need for more honest conversation, more genuine truth seeking, more admitting when people are wrong, more seeing the other side. Definitely more love towards the other side as well. I'm guilty of also fucking getting pissed at the other side as well. Leftism sometimes drives me insane. Also, I forgot to talk about feminism. Fuck feminism. But I think it's incredibly anti-women, which is a very hot take, but I don't think it's in their best interest whatsoever. But without diving into that right now, because that is a whole topic in and of itself, but I hope to make more videos like this where I share my take on certain things going on and just try to be as reasonable as possible, even though some people might think I'm completely unreasonable and a right-wing extremist, and that's to be expected sometimes. So especially when you go against exactly what the media wants you to think. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Hope some of this was interesting. Let me know if you agreed with some things, disagreed with some things. Open up the discussion in the comments. If I'm being honest, I'm not going to sit there and debate with you in the comments, but if you have an insightful enough response, then I may respond to it in video format. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and I will catch you in the next one.